Well, we're going to be looking tonight at part 2 of the life of David. And David is one of my heroes in the Bible. I mentioned this morning or last week that I spent the last 2 years living with David in the Psalms, memorizing the different Psalms and quoting them daily and catching the heartbeat of a man, the only man in the Bible that God called a man after his own heart. The only man in the Bible that God said that about him. And that impressed me so much that I said, you know, God, I want to be that man. I want to be that man. Last week, we looked at the reason God called David a man after his own heart was because of 2 things. His view of God and God's view of him. And just to say, he was a humble servant, even though he could be a rascal at times, and a warrior, and et cetera, but even though those are the kind of things that happened with his ministry, but God said he is a man after my own heart. And his view of God, I mean, the fact that he saw God as all-powerful and all-knowing and all-present, and those are found throughout his Psalms, and a loving God, God of mercy. Those are evidences of his view of God. So tonight, I'm going to preach number 2 on David. So turn to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 16. 1 Samuel chapter 16. I'm going to take in this message an interesting rabbit trail. I'm going to talk about dragons. You will not forget tonight's message. I promise you. 10 years from now, you'll come to me. I'm not sure I'll be around, but 10 years from now, Pastor Scott, I remember a message you preached, and you talked about these dragons. But it all fits together as we're looking at the life of David. That's the only reason I bring that rabbit trail in. So look at 1 Samuel chapter 16. Look at verse 1. It says, "And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul?" Now let me explain that phrase. God had just told Saul, through Samuel the prophet, your kingdom is done. You're done. You've disobeyed me, and I'm looking for a man, and I found a man who is a man after my own heart, and his name is David. And so I get the idea from this phrase right here in 1 Samuel 16, verse 1, that Samuel really cared for Saul. Now, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask for a replay, and I'm going to do a YouTube search in heaven on why Samuel mourned for Saul. Why did he cry for Saul? But, and the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I've rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thy horn with oil. Go, I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I provided for me a king among his sons. Now, a little background on Saul. According to the popular vote of the people, Saul was their man for king. He was the most qualified for the position of the king. And I want to make this statement, in fact, this will be in your notes. He was the most qualified from the shoulders up, from here up. Okay? Handsome, sharp-looking. He was quite the guy. And he was tall. But what was God's opinion? Well, whom did God want them to have as a king? Well, it was God's desire that Israel had a theocratic kingdom. You say, what do you mean, theocratic? Theo is the word God. He wanted to be their king. God wanted to be their king. He did not want them to have an earthly king. But the people cried out, we want a king that we can see. We don't want an invisible king. When we talk to people from other nations, they say, where's your king? Show us your king. Then we have to say, oh, well, he's invisible. You can't see him. He's in heaven. We want a king we can see, a leader that's not invisible. We want to be like other nations. They'll have kings. We want to be like the Moabites and the Philistines and the Jebusites and the other nations. They have kings, and we want one too. And we want a king now. And they weren't willing to wait on the Lord to give them what they need. Turn to 1 Samuel chapter 8. This really burdened Samuel, so he brought it up to the Lord. Look at 1 Samuel 8, look at verse 7. And the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Now that's curious. I'm not going to get into a study tonight on the perfect will of God and the permissive will of God. This was the permissive will of God. Okay? God's perfect will of God is he wanted to be their king. But now he's going to permit them, but he's going to tell them, here's what's going to happen now in the permissive will of God. Look at verse 8. According to all the works which they've done since the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even unto this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. Now therefore, Samuel, hearken unto their voice. Howbeit yet protest solemnly, seriously unto them. Show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen when you have a king. You want God's will? Here's what's going to happen in the permissive will of God. He will take your sons, verse 11. He'll appoint them for himself. The king will appoint them for himself, for his chariots, his horsemen, and some shall run before the chariots. He will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s. He will set them to ear his ground, to reap his harvest, to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be their confectionaries, to be their cooks, to be bakers. And he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to your servants. And he will take the tenth of your seed and of your vineyards and give them to the officers, to his servants. He will take your men servants. Well, you get the idea. Here's what's going to happen. If you, now, since I've said, okay, have a king, here's what's going to happen with you being in the permissive will of God. Here are the consequences. So the Lord let them have exactly what they wanted. They got a man who had great leadership skills, Saul. He was handsome, tall, and dark. Sound familiar? People choose political leadership based on charisma and looks. Wow! He'll be a good image for Israel. He'll be a good poster child. We'll show his poster on the freeways. Let's have some calendars with him. That's in the Hebrew. You got to be a Hebrew scholar to know that. Saul's our guy. They were not so much interested in his character as his looks. So Saul came on the scene. He swept them off their feet. He had a measure of humility to begin with. He seemed able to rally the people without a cause. He had enough leadership, enough courage to get an army together. And before long, the Israelites thought, you know what? Glad we made this choice. He's the man for the job. Well, the first feat that he accomplished was the rescue of Jabesh Gilead from the Ammonites, and that impressed all of his supporters, all of his donors. In fact, the people of Jabesh Gilead were so impressed with Saul as their king, they wanted everyone who was not supportive of him to be executed. 1 Samuel chapter 11. Now let me just say, it impressed them for a little while. After he had ruled for a while, his true character began to surface. It began to be manifested. He became short-tempered, thin-skinned. He was given to fits of depression, thoughts of murder. When Saul rose to power, David wasn't even born yet. Did you know that? By the time David was born, Israel was far from God. They'd become disillusioned with their leader, Saul. You know, I'm so glad God didn't give up on Israel, aren't you? He's not giving up on them today either. He intervened at that time through the prophet Samuel. I want you to listen. Turn to 1 Samuel chapter 13. I want you to listen to what Samuel says to Saul after Saul had disobeyed God. Look at 1 Samuel 13 and 14. And Samuel said unto Saul, Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever, but now thy kingdom shall not continue. Now look at the next phrase. Verse 14. The Lord had sought him a man out of his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be the captain of his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. Now I want you to notice the little three-letter word in verse 14. It's the word man. A man after God's own heart. God chose a man. Only a man. No more, no less, a man. However, David was an awesome young man for the glory of God. Did you know? In the Bible, there's more written about David than any other character. I mean, Abraham had 14 chapters in the Bible mentioning his name. Joseph, 14 chapters. Jacob, 11 chapters. Elijah, 10 chapters. And David, 66 chapters. And 59 references to him in the New Testament. If you ask his father Jesse, hey, Dad, hey, Jesse, you think David will someday be a good candidate for being the king of Israel? You know, I can't speak for Jesse, but I kind of think his answer would be no. Nah. He's only a shepherd boy. He's good at raising sheep and protecting sheep, but he's not good at leading a nation. He's never had any experience in politics. So when God looks at great leaders, what does he look for? What are the qualifications? Well, ask the Jewish leaders about Peter and John. What did they say about Peter and John in Acts chapter 4? Oh, these guys are unschooled and they're just ordinary men and they're unlearned and ignorant men. I like what Paul says. Turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 1. I like what he says in 1 Corinthians 1 concerning the kind of people God picks as his leaders. You want to be picked as a leader for God? This could be your theme passage for your life. Look at verse 26. For you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God had chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things that are mighty. And base things of the world and things that are despised hath God chosen, yea, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are all. Here, now look at that are. Look at verse 29. That no flesh should glory in his presence. Isn't that good? That no flesh should glory in his presence. Hey, look, Jesus, there's Matthew. He's a tax collector. Look at him in his tax booth. He's pretty wealthy. You know, Matthew's occupation was despised in all of Israel. He became one of Jesus' leadership team and apostles and the author of the Gospel of Matthew. I like Luke 10, verse 21. In that hour, Jesus rejoiced in spirit and said, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and of earth, that thou hast hid these things from the wise and prudent, and you have revealed them unto babes. You think, man, I'm just a baby in Christ. Listen, I'm messy. Could God ever use you? Well, Jesus said God reveals things unto babes. You know, people said concerning Jesus, hey, isn't he the son of a carpenter? Mark 6. Well, you look at Jesus, born in a stable, no place to lay his head, he said. You look at Moses, a shepherd. Daniel, a captive slave. Peter and John, ordinary, unlearned, ignorant fishermen. So who do we look for when choosing a leader? The pretty people? The best looking? The most intelligent? The successful? The brightest? Surface. We're impressed with the smile, the haircut, the build, the face, the one who looks the best on TV, the one with the greatest athletic ability. And you know what? All through college, you got a 4.2 GPA. Oh, wow. Isn't that good? I think I was lucky to get a 3.0. What does God say? Well, this is so good. Theme verse for us picking leadership. 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. Look at it. 16, verse 7. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance. Let me stop there. Samuel had Jesse lined up all the sons in line. Oh, look at Eliab. Boy, he's big. Look at the muscles all the way down. Whoa, these guys are amazing. Look at them. Oh, let's pick Eliab. I think he's the guy. God said unto Samuel, look at verse 7. Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. Here it is. Can you read this with me? For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. He says, I don't make my choices on outward appearance, but on the heart. I like, this is God speaking, I like picking nobodies and turning them into somebodies. I like taking uncut diamonds and fashioning them into beautiful cut diamonds for my glory. Now, back to chapter 16 of 1 Samuel. Look at verse 1. How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I've rejected him from reigning over Israel? Samuel felt responsible for Saul. Samuel was concerned for the people. Samuel was concerned for his own safety. You're going to see that. Samuel liked Saul. So why had the Lord rejected Saul from leadership? Well, he disobeyed the Lord. He'd been told, go and smite Amalek. Utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not. Slay both man and woman, infant and suckling. Ox and sheep, camel and ass. Everything that breathes. You kill them all. So what did Saul do? He kept some of the sheep, some of the animals, and he kept the king, King Agag, alive. Well, finally, here comes Samuel into the city where Saul was, and Saul greets him, "Hey, buddy, how you doing, buddy?" This is Scott paraphrase. Don't you love that when people call you buddy? "Hey, buddy, Jesus, slap 5. Yeah, good to see you. How you doing, man? You doing good, Jesus?" Now, I'm reading into it. I know I am. Jesus says, "Well, doing fine. You doing good? You doing good? You good? You good? You good, Saul?" "Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm serving you. I'm doing right. I'm doing what you told me to do." In background, "Meh, meh, moo, moo." Now, Samuel says, "What means the bleating of the sheep? The lowing of the cattle? Well, what means all that?" And so what does Saul do? He blames the people for his disobedience, gives a spiritual excuse. "I just wanted to sacrifice them to the Lord. That's why I kept them. Hey, that's why I disobeyed." It's like the guy told me who smoked dope. "I just feel much closer to Jesus when I smoke marijuana. He just revealed so many wonderful insights to me." He was serious. He said, "I've got a great workshop, and I've got pictures of nude women." He said, "I don't lust after them. They're made in God's image." You see how we get. It's not my fault. I'm a victim. That's exactly where Saul was. And then 1 Samuel 15, verse 22, Samuel said, "Hath the Lord his great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold," and I love this, look at verse 22 of 15:22. "Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry." And then the phrase, "Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord," look at me, Saul, look at me, "he also hath rejected thee from being king." Oh. I think following that is some of the saddest verses in the Bible. And we're not going to read all of them, but you're in chapter 15 of 1 Samuel. Look at verse 24. "And Saul said, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord." Now watch this, watch this. "I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and thy words, for I feared the people." Right? Did I read that right? No, I missed a word. "Because I feared the people." Basically, it's not my fault. I'm a victim. That's the thought there. The reason I kept the Agag alive and I wanted to sacrifice all these animals and disobey you is I feared the people. That's the reason. I'm a victim. "And I obeyed their voice. Now, therefore, I pray thee, pardon my sin and turn again with me, that I may worship the Lord." Samuel. "And Samuel said unto Saul, I will not return with thee, for thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord hath rejected thee from being king over Israel." Now, back to chapter 16, look at verse 1. "Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I've rejected him from reigning over Israel?" Look at the next phrase. "Fill thine horn with oil, and go, and I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons." What on earth? What horn is he talking about? Trumpet? Trombone? You know, travelers in those days would take a supply of water with them on journeys. Water was always scarce. So they would carry it in a goat skin or the horn of an animal. Close it off on the end, cap it off, there's your water. Saul and his officers would not be unduly alerted if they saw Samuel coming in carrying a horn. Just water. They would have no way of knowing that it had contained oil to be used in anointing a new king. Now look at verse 2. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hear me, he'll kill me. Oh boy. And the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I'm come to sacrifice unto the Lord. So first of all, he says, how can I go? God, how can I make this happen here? If King Saul catches on to this plan, he's going to kill me. He's a murderer, and you know it. So we see here, Samuel is frightened out of his wits, scared to death. Now, let me just say, before we start judging Samuel, let's put ourselves in his shoes or in his sandals. Would you be frightened too? Oh, yeah. Probably. Brother Chuck wouldn't be afraid. He'll take him on. But why was he so frightened? Well, yeah, Saul was a deceiver and a murderer. Saul had a track record. I couldn't help but say, Samuel, where's your focus now? Your focus is on Saul, not the Lord. That's why you're so frightened. You ever felt that way? You ever take your eyes off the Lord and allow your focus to be on a situation or another person? You ever allowed your eyes to be taken off of God onto a person that irritates you, intimidates you, so you're kind of just afraid of that person? How can I go? Samuel said, how can I go? Lord, can I go? If brother so-and-so is there, I don't know what I'm going to say or do. How can I teach my Sunday school? I've been so criticized by Sister Lucy. How can I possibly preach? If so-and-so is in the audience and he's done everything he can to discredit me in my ministry, how can I do it? A pastor shared his heart about a certain situation that came into his church and school, and he had to make a decision. He expelled over 20 students. Well, he made the right decision. Certain, quote, good people now had left the ministry of his church and school, Christian school. Another pastor, a good man, shared with me how a man in his church had become very critical of him. He'd gone to others, and finally he said, Pastor, there are 6 people in this church that are thinking about leaving, and they're giving people. This pastor said, I have a knot in my stomach. I have a hard time focusing on the ministry. And I kind of think this is the way Samuel was at this time. That's, by the way, that's not uncommon in ministry situations. Sunday school teachers face it. Youth workers face it. Pastors face it. Samuel faced it. If I go, he'll kill me. Jeremiah faced it, afraid of people's faces, he said. Paul faced it. He had people criticizing him, threatening him. All forsook him. No one stood for him or with him. Elijah faced it. He had just defeated the prophets of Baal, called down fire from heaven. Wicked Jezebel threatens him. And you now see him lying next to a broom tree saying, God, kill me. God, kill me. That's Elijah. So if you've not faced it in your life and ministry, you will. There will be a certain person who's there to steal your focus. Always there to agitate you. To capture you in the middle of your mistake. See there, see there, see there. And then rub your face in the sand. I've recommended to certain pastors and those in ministry a book called Well-Intentioned Dragons. Well, this is where I'm going to get on a rabbit trail. A good book. A book written for those that are in spiritual leadership, whether pastor, teacher, whatever. It's a book that describes the various attacks on spiritual leaders that devastate them if they allow themselves to change their focus off the Lord, like Samuel did, and turn it to these well-intentioned dragons. And now this writer says, dragons, of course, are fictional beasts. Now, I disagree with that. I really believe, biblically, there were dragons. And I believe there were fire-breathing dragons in the Old Testament. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail right now. He said, dragons, of course, are fictional beasts, monstrous reptiles with lion's claws, a serpent's tail, bat wings, scaly skin, and they exist only in your imagination. I took a picture of one of those dragons there on our recent vacation we had. We saw it. We were attacked on the freeway by one of these dragons. But there are dragons of a different sort, he says, decidedly real. In most cases, though not always, they do not intend to be sinister. In fact, dragons are usually quite friendly. But their charm belies their power to destroy. Now, this writer says, within the church, they're often sincere, well-meaning saints, but they leave ulcers, strained relationships, and hard feelings in their wake. They don't consider themselves difficult people. They don't sit up nights thinking of ways to be nasty. Often they're pillars in the community, talented, strong personalities, deservingly respected. This writer says, but for some reason, they undermine the ministry. They are not naturally rebellious, pathological, uncontrolled, unreasonable. They are loyal church members, convinced they're serving God, but they wind up doing more harm than good. Some dragons are openly critical. They're the ones that accuse you, you pick one, to be too spiritual. Or they point at you and you're not spiritual enough. Or you're too dominant. No, you're too laid back. You're too narrow. No, you're just too loose, brother. You're too structured. You're too disorganized. Or you pick an ulterior motive yourself. So now here it is. Wait for it. In his chapter on identifying a dragon. Now keep in mind, we're talking about Saul's criticism of David, of Samuel, and Samuel, the man of God, thinking that if publicly he chose David, then Saul would kill him. Okay, we're thinking about that well-intentioned. I'm not sure Saul was well-intentioned, though, but he was a dragon. Well, here they are. He describes, this writer, many of these dragons which rob a spiritual leader of their focus. Number one, the bird dog dragon. It's a four-legged bird dog. They point to where the hunter should shoot, but this is talking about two-legged bird dog that loves to be the pastor's eyes, ears, and nose, sniffing out items for attention. No, pastor. You need to look into this and this. You need to go see so-and-so. You need to visit so-and-so. They got real problems in the home. Pastor, you should probably call so-and-so right now. Pastor, we need more activities. Why doesn't the church do something about this? Don't you think this calls for church discipline? Then you have the supernatural bird dog. Pastor, this church isn't what it used to be. We just don't have the spirit around here that we used to have. That's the bird dog. You want more? The wet blanket dragon. It's no use even trying. These individuals are negative about everything. Their motto, nothing ventured, nothing lost. They spread gloom, they erase excitement, they bog down everything in business meetings. They exhibit the same attitude toward any step of faith. You know, we tried that before, but it didn't work. They're so intimidating that people are afraid to vote against them. That's the wet blanket. Then you have the well-intentioned dragon called the entrepreneur. This is the opposite of the wet blanket. They're the first to greet visitors, first to invite them over to their house. Problem is, he's equally eager to sell them vitamins, bee pollen, or car wax. Entrepreneur. Then you have Captain Bluster. Everything's a crisis to have Captain Bluster. This is the person, this writer says, who comes from the Union Steward School of Diplomacy and speaks with an exclamation point instead of a period. He or she is always right. Everyone else is wrong. He doesn't mind saying in the middle of a church discussion, I don't like what you said. And this kind of person is a steamroller who flattens anyone in his way with an overwhelming certainty that his is the only way to do it. Negotiation is a dirty word. I think these are the ones who work themselves into a frenzy over mistakes made in the church. And we do make mistakes. Amen, Pastor? You usually find these ones in little huddles off in some corner. Sometimes you find them in the foyer of a church. They're so upset. Of course, visitors walk in and walk right past them, and they're too busy to be weeping and criticizing, and they could care less about visitors. They have to deal with this crisis right now. They're so intense and so upset, they call different individuals, they call them to get their input, all the while oblivious to what they're doing to the spirit of the church. You confront them with the fact that they are sowing discord, seeds of discord, and they're spreading dissension in the body, and flies right past them. Why? They're victims. All right, then you have the fickle financier. The fickle financier. This is the person who uses money to register approval or disapproval of church decisions. Sometimes he protests silently by merely withholding offerings. He's quick to accuse the church of misappropriating funds, while all the time he is robbing God of the tithe. Then you have the dragon, well-intentioned dragon, we call him the busybody. He enjoys telling others how to do their jobs. That's it, busybody. Then you have the sniper. The sniper avoids face-to-face conflict, but picks off spiritual leaders with pot shots in private conversation. Hey, brother. Be sure to pray for Brother Cecil, Pastor Cecil. You know, he's got some problems, you know. Really. Now, I don't want to gossip. I just want to simply share this as a prayer request. Would you pray with me about it? Then you have the bookkeeper. The bookkeeper dragon keeps a written record of everything the pastor does that isn't in the spirit of Christ. Pastor, I remember 3 years ago you lost your temper. You have the spirit of anger. Yeah, soon angry. Then you have the merchant of muck, who breeds dissatisfaction by attracting others who know he's more willing to listen to and elaborate on things that are wrong in the church. I know the pastor won't listen to you, but you have my you have my ear right now. I just love you so much. Then you have the dragon, well-intentioned dragon called the legalist. He's got a list of absolutes that stretch from the kind of car the pastor can drive or should not drive, to a number of verses in a hymn that must be sung. No new songs, brother. I remember when we first started using PowerPoint. Oh, that became an issue. You realize, brother, PowerPoints are the slippery slope. You've gone down that slippery slope to compromise. I remember the day, it happened right here. I wore a sport coat, like I got on now, and a tie. And a certain person met me and said, well, you know what, Pastor, are you still a fundamentalist? I said, what do you mean? He says, you're wearing a sport coat. And here's exactly what he said. Can we expect this in the future from you? I said, you bet. Dragons. So how do you spot them? If you see one, I mean, quite frankly, you can't tell by looking. They sneak in, like Jude says, unawares. They go to your love feasts. They'll be very popular. Dragons can be as friendly and charming as non-dragons. Sometimes you can tell by listening. Now hear me carefully. People can criticize. People can voice dogmatic opinions at Woodside. They can tangle with others and still not be dragons. I am not saying that if you ever disagree with leadership, you're a dragon. No. Well, that's very healthy for our church, to have men and women that can take you with a good spirit and say, listen, who was it? Took Apollos aside, the two tent makers in the book of Acts. Aquila and Priscilla took them aside, said, hey, do you realize Christ arose? And the Holy Spirit came? No. Well, he did. And changed Apollos' ministry. So the distinguishing characteristic of a dragon is not what he said, but how he said it. Often they have a spirit that enjoys being an adversary rather than an ally. They have a consistent pattern of focusing on a narrow special interest rather than the big picture, which leads to tangents rather than a balanced church life. Theirs is a spirit quick to vilify, and that means to malign or slander, but they're very slow to apologize. You can't get these kind of well-intentioned dragons to be vulnerable, humble, and apologize. I think perhaps the greatest damage done by true dragons is not their direct opposition. It's more intangible. You can't see it. They destroy enthusiasm. The morale so necessary for church health and growth, they destroy it. People no longer feel good about inviting friends to worship services. The air is tense, the church is depressed, and everyone is aware of us and them. What's the bottom line? Here it is. The effect these have on those in spiritual leadership is devastating if they're allowed to steal the focus. They sap energy, and this writer says just as damaging, they goad them into reacting instead of acting. One pastor said the real problem isn't so much their overt actions, but they divert your attention and keep you off guard even if they never openly oppose you. You find yourself not planning, not thinking of the future, not seeking a vision for the church. You're just trying to survive. It's like that cat hanging from the branch. And the caption says, hang in there. All right? That's from well-intentioned dragons. Now quickly, I've got about 3 minutes. Will you give me 4 minutes? Okay. Look at verse 2. Back to 1 Samuel 16, verse 2. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hear it, he'll kill me. Where's his focus? Is it on the Lord? And the Lord said, God said, Jehovah said, take a heifer with you. Now that's a young female cow that's not had a calf. These are cows used in peace offerings. All right? Now look at verse 3. And call Jesse to the sacrifice. I will show thee what thou shalt do. And thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I name unto thee. So let me ask you, and we're going to close. You think David is aware of all this going on right now? Nah. Doesn't have a clue. What's he doing while this is going on between Samuel and God? What's he doing? Just out in the fields, tending sheep? fulfilling his responsibility to his father, being a good son, being an obedient shepherd boy. So here's the so what. Who did the people choose to lead Israel and why? How many know? Let me see your hands. David. Why? Who did the people? Oh, the people chose Saul. You're right, exactly. My bad there. I've got ahead. They chose Saul. Why? What? Appearance. From the head up, he was qualified. What eventually happened to his leadership? Yeah. Sue Haas is going. I'm going. All right? Lost his ministry and lost his family and lost his life. 3 things. What did David's father think about David? Opinion here. Well, no. He's taking care of sheep out there. He's not one of these most qualified. He's a shepherd, just sheep. Go get him. In fact, we're not going to eat until you go get him. How did God look at David? He was a man, what? After God's own heart. So who do we look for? When we see potential of discipleship, we see potential in choosing leaders. What's a necessary ingredient in that person's life? Well, they have to be after God's own heart. They're thirsty. They want to learn. They're teachable spirit. They're humble. They're repentant. Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for your word. Love you, Lord. I pray that you'd help us to be a people after your own heart. Thank you for David.